Let's move on to payment schedule. Somebody said with you, and this is another, I think, another example of preparing for success. In other words, properly understanding the sequence of the project, cash flowing in line with the program that works and the rest of it. So it's scheduling out payments, agreeing that schedule, and then moving forward again from that position of knowledge. Hopefully avoid disputes, but again, in your experience, is this something that is properly done at the outset to ensure for success, or is it something that could be improved?
No, payment provisions probably lead to maybe the vast majority of disputes that we deal with one way or another. Payment provisions should be simple, and to a large extent in the construction industry, they're sorted out by legislation, by the Housing Grants Construction and Regeneration Act, or the Construction Act as it's more commonly known, which sets out a set of rules that a contract has to comply with in terms of payment dates, due dates, final dates, and so on and so forth. But contracting parties are free to move within these within the Act, the legislation, as long as they comply with the legislation. And so there is a bit of freedom for them to come up with their own things, which does then lead sometimes to very long final dates for payment. But there has to be a final date for payment in the contract, but it can be 3 months, 50 days, or can be 7 days or something like that. It can range. So, for interim payments and for obviously the end of the contract payment, the final payment under the contract. The importance of understanding these is twofold, I think, for those moving down the supply chain. First of all, they need to really understand the payment terms so that they comply with them. So if an application has got to be in by a date, then it has to be in by that date. If it's got to be in 7 days before the end of the month to be projected to the end of the month, it's got to be in and it's got to be projected. And it's got to be, all these things have got to be clear in the application under the Act. So they've got to make sure that they comply with the requirements of the payment terms in terms of making applications for payment, to set up that then payment dates become due and then final payment dates come and people down the supply chain get their money. So it's really important that contractors understand these payment terms in order that they can comply with them. Because a failure to comply may mean that they would miss a payment cycle and then into the payment cycle or something like that. So that's one very important reason. The second important reason is that they've got to check the contract at the beginning and see if it's been amended. If they're used to a JCT contract or an SBC contract or an ABC contract or something that's got standard terms, check that the amendments were back to the previous points. Don't assume that because it is an SBC it'll be standard. Check it, make sure. But then you've got to be sure as the supplier or the subcontractor, contractor, however, wherever you are in the chain, that these payment terms suit how your income, your cash flow, and your business works. There's no point in entering into a contract that's a great contract and it's a lot of money, but actually you don't see the money 2 to 3 months down the line, and you're put into a frustrated and difficult situation. So they've really got to think about it from a cash flow point of view. On the upfront, again, transparency. If the payment terms are 40, 50 days, which is not necessarily unusual in our industry, and they just cannot finance that, the cash flow doesn't work for them, go back and say, what does that mean for that business? That means they have to borrow the money, that means they get interest costs or lending costs or whatever. Go back to the person that you're contracted with and say, if I get paid every 2 weeks, or if I know that, then there can be benefits to you in terms of cost as well, because I wouldn't have to build in lending costs and all these sort of things. So again, be open about these things and discuss these things and get payment terms that suit you. So the 2 reasons are, first of all, to make sure you comply with them, look at them, make sure you comply with them. And secondly, make sure your business can live with them. It can work with you. And so that brings me on to the schedule.
Yes.
Which of course is a very important, it's a very important point of the guide. And the guide does have an appendix that gives you a set out schedule or a template to follow, which explains when the application date, and monitor when the application date is, the due date, the final date, the date for payment notice, and so on. When you get into a contract, or when you're entering into a contract, you know that these things, get these dates in your diary, get the schedule up the wall, big red marks on the key dates, really understand it, know what you're doing so that you can follow it. So it's a really good bit in the guidance, in the guidance and the practice, and to follow and to get on your wall and know what you're doing in a contract. It's an excellent template and I would recommend it. But one thing that you have to remember about templates and this or lots of templates is that generally when any people enter into a contract and it's a 6-month contract, year contract, the template will cover 6 months or a year. Often it doesn't go on beyond that. And we know that in our industry, often contracts go on longer than the next. And if you run into a period where you no longer have a schedule or a template that was enforced, you could run into difficulties of it being argued that you're not entitled to any more payments until your part of the job's finished. So if you have got a template or a schedule that's up on your wall and it's running out, before it runs out, go back and see, are we all agreeing that we just continue in this format, that it's the end of the month and whatever? Get that in writing, get the schedule extended. So just keep on top of it and then use it, and it should be better, hopefully.
And it's I said in the opening of that question, it's about preparing for success.
Absolutely.
All that work up front, and very important, agreeing with all the parties. And I like this idea of it's up on the wall, so everybody can see it every day. It's driving the business. And you mentioned about the financing of extended payment periods. Now, obviously, there is a cost of the delay in payment. Is that something that clients are understanding or even paying for, or is it somehow washing through down the supply chain so that the client is almost oblivious that that extended period has an impact and others, perhaps less able to absorb the impact, are having to do so?
Yes, I mean, I think it's back to this risk point that it's getting flushed down the supply chain. But again, I'm not suggesting that clients are big bad guys on this, because the clients maybe can't pay. Maybe they don't get the money to a certain point in time to pay out. You know, it's not necessarily they're keeping all the money in and not paying it. So it is a matter of finding the pattern, the train, the cash flow that suits everybody. You know, it suits everybody as best it can. There won't always be something that, you know, is perfect for both parties, but it could be better for both parties perhaps, and that's the point really, because I don't think sometimes some clients, main contractors, do realise how much it is probably putting strain on their supply chain, which is not good in the long run. You know, if the supply chain is getting put into distress situations because of somebody up the line holding the money when they could let it go earlier, because they're more able, they can more capitally reserve or whatever, you know, that will help their supply chain get the job done, because that's what we want to do. In this business, we want to get projects done, completed on time and well done. So a lot of factors lead into that. We're a very fragmented industry, but if everybody pulls the weight, we might get better.
And it is again about this transparency of all parties understanding the implications.
Collaboration. I think we talk a lot in the guide about collaboration, and really, you know, it's important that people talk to each other, and when things go wrong, they again talk to each other. You know, don't put your head in the sand. It won't know.
And Len, in your role, you must see this whole issue about payment terms, payment periods as a.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of issues. I mean, you still get scenarios where a main contractor will say to a subcontractor, I can't pay you because the QS has not valued your work this month, stuff like that. And until we have a complete overhaul of the procurement system, you're going to get these situations. The one thing I have noticed recently, whereas some clients might have a one payment problem a month, these clients are now encountering 4 or 5 payment problems a month, and the impact that's having on their financial planning and the business is becoming almost impossible. I think I totally agree with what Janey has said. I think another thing that's needed when a payment application goes in, there's quite often radio silence from the PQS or whoever, and I think subcontractors need to be a lot more robust in contacting the QS. If you get any issues over my application for payment, bring these to the surplus now. Instead, you wait 28 days and you got to pay less notice, and you find you only got a quarter of what you've applied for. So again, I think it's down to big improvement in the commercial management of contract.
And Ian, your role was commercial, the commercial side of things, how do you see it?
Well, I tend to get involved usually when it's in a situation where I'm a member company, whether that be a main contractor or a subcontractor, because we have both in our organisation. Generally, when it's already gone past that point and they've got a problem, and we're trying to say how do we resolve it. Ultimately, understanding the payment schedules and such like, I do believe it makes things significant. You're working towards it. I think the issue that comes out of this is sometimes if you're not getting a payment 1 month, it tends to roll over the next month and rolls on the next month, and it's either find out that's it. If I identify when you don't get that payment, if that's going to be a dispute at the end, or if it's just going to be a timing issue that hasn't come through. But generally speaking, the cash flow is critical. If that's likely to be something that's going to be a longer term issue, you need to try and deal with that before it gets to the point of a dispute.
Yes.
And I think part of the process is if you've got a regular application date going in and things that go in, you can see where there's a pattern. If there's things getting held back, or if it's that if you're not following these guidance and dates and such like that, sometimes you end up with a situation. You put an application 1 month and it's paid the next month, it might not get paid. So you don't really know where you're going, but at least if you're following that and monitoring what you're putting in and getting feedback all the time, should be there.
And as Len has pointed out, the importance of tracking the process and ensuring that when a payment is submitted, that you can't just assume, well, that's it, and I'll go on with the next thing. It's actually sticking with
absolutely, making sure that you've got that. And it's important that the documentation, because basically if people don't follow those dates, ultimately, one with where you are on that particular spectrum, if you're a client, contractor or subcontractor, you're potentially going to have a potential dispute on that if you fail to hit these dates. And the technicality of not making that date seems to be like use case before it goes anywhere. So it's so great.
Yeah. And if I could ask the other, Ian, obviously you represent a significant number of members of the industry and the wider supply chain. What about from your own perspective, what are you discussing with your members around scheduling of payments and the administration that goes with all of that?
Well, I think all the advice given thus far around accuracy of paperwork, getting your dates right, ensuring that your team are briefed on what they need to do when. I think the critical point from our end is that the cost of all this is higher than it's ever been. With interest, the cost of capital is higher than it's ever been. Businesses have had their bank accounts depleted by COVID, hyperinflation. So it is an industry very much in survival mode now. And it is a very real need to ensure that cash moves through the supply chain effectively, or we won't have one. Quite literally, we won't have one.
And of course, the industry is being asked to deal with many things now that, perhaps 20, 30 years ago were not the case. The safety is at the very top of the agenda, quality, net zero, there's all these other things. And of course, for the industry to invest for learning, research and development to respond to all of these things, it cannot do so unless the cash is flowing.
And that's, a lot of these are upfront costs as well, David, aren't they? So it's the upfront cost of construction is again higher than it's been. So again, we operate across the UK. The Building Safety Act comes. The next iteration of the Building Safety Act is next month. So early next month, 6th of April, the next round of Building Safety Act changes come through. And again, there's much more emphasis, much more focus on the work that's done before we get to the construction site. And again, we can't run on air. And there's more investment required in the IT to support things like the golden thread. And again, whether you're operating in England or Scotland, the golden thread is a logical principle about effective information management. That requires investment. Sustainability, we definitely want to be more sustainable as a supply chain. But so many decisions we make are the best we can do in the time that's available, which often means just rip all of that out, get it all out of the way, stick it in a skip because we've got the builders coming in to do the work. And there's so little planning is currently done. If we want to do more of that, again, it requires more upfront investment. You know, it still staggers me really as an industry. You know, if you look at application dates on a typical job, you'll be looking at a sort of a 30-day application based on 30 days of work. We're legislating for something like 45 days is this sort of an acceptable payment amount according to the late payment regulations. So you're looking at 75 days. You know, assuming that everything lands as it should do. Any of the delays that we hit, we're starting to get to 90 days. We're lending money to build projects. 90 days worth of money, and you look at how that's now being offset, the behaviours in the supply chain that's upsetting that. So, you know, we know that material price is being offset through supplier credit, and then that's being loaded up by people putting that on a charge card because that gives you an extra buffer zone on that. But again, it's unsecured credit. Once you're bumped, you're very vulnerable. And then, of course, all the labour is still very much paid. Certainly our end of the supply chain, again, largely we've done some research with Reading University, but largely, you know, we rely on contingent labour because we've got no other way of managing the ebbs and flows of work, the moving start dates. You know, it's such a flexible, fast-moving sector. We're heavily reliant on contingent labour. Contingent labour gets paid weekly, and so we've got no buffer there. So again, the industry is forking out huge sums of money before they receive anything back again. And when the cost of capital interest rates are high, it's unsustainable. We've got to start thinking about how we capitalise construction through deposit, is my view. And there are allowances within standard form contracts for deposits, but again, it's seldom utilised.
Thanks very much, Ian. Obviously, in the time we have, we can only, to some extent, scratch the surface. So, you know, I encourage everybody to look at the guide and, you know, pick up the points that we've all shared and go into the detail that the guide contains.